Baahrakhari leadership invited me, I agreed on one condition. I should be able to listen to Mr. Kant in a way that I'm not distracted, right? So, and it was, I'm very grateful that you were able to travel despite all the hiccups. And Rameshwar Khanalji, obviously, uh, my predecessor, my friend, a guide in many respects, and the masterful technocratic blueprint that he had is very much has already been owned by me, and I'm trying to follow many of his sane and wise policy advice. Um, and The high-level Economic Commission report sits on my desk, and as we try to refashion Nepal's economic policy making, the paradigm, I think we're very grateful that we're able to benefit from his decades of wisdom and experience. But the keynote speaker today, Mr. Amitabh Kant, I followed him for more than a decade. An electric speaker, very erudite, a visionary administrator, policymaker. But today I saw a new facet in his personality, this your deep empathy for Nepal and its people. And I think I am really grateful for all your insightful policy advice and the experiences to draw from around the world, but particularly India, but how you can relate to the possibilities and the fortunes of Nepal and the Nepali people. I think for me that was greatly inspirational. And as I work on this year's budget, a lot of the big ideas that you had will be will shape a lot of my thinking as well. Long underrated as a country, underappreciated, but against the immense potentials that we have, a lot of our resources have been underutilized as well. And this is, I think, the theme of both our keynote speakers. The private sector leaders also emphasize this point. And as we move forward, I think sometimes the underdogs surprise with impressive results at the end. And that's the journey that we're embarking on in Nepal. The unprecedented Genji intervention, the movement, has preponed many of our plans. We at the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, we're planning to emerge as the biggest party by 2027, the regular electoral cycle. But thanks to the Genji movement, that time has been, preponed, and it may seem that we've not been adequately prepared, but a lot of the thinking that our team, our leadership has been putting in, the current Prime Minister was a very successful mayor of Kathmandu city. His deep executive experiences is also shaping the way we govern the country. The foreign minister, myself, a lot of the other leaders with our wide experience, we've been thinking about what to do in Nepal. Should we ever have that chance? Should the people of Nepal ever trust us and bequeath us with that responsibility to steer Nepal in a new direction? What would we do? So a lot of these ideas, I hope, will be executed over the next year, and we have a 5-year term. This projects an era of stability, policy predictability, and this good for investment, good for job creation, etc. A comment that Mr. Kant made in passing struck me, and I quickly checked on my mobile phone also. What was India's per capita income in 2014 before they took on this modern path under Prime Minister Modi? It was exactly where Nepal is at today, $1,500 per capita. So it's our moment, that structural break that economists talk about, right? In Nepali, I often say, this arthik rajkaas ko jahaz lai modne samay. It has an uncanny resemblance with the Titanic. If we can't handle it, we may sink. But just to steer a massive, a beautiful ship in the vast Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean. Sometimes we see this in our television. Just a narrow nudge to steer that massive ship over a matter of few months or a year, lands in a completely different destination. And that's how I see the economic stewardship of this country. Not so small. I was telling Mr. Khan that had Nepal been in the middle of Europe, we'd be the 7th largest country in Europe. 30 million is actually quite sizable, bigger than Australia. But it's just that our two impressive neighbors dwarf us wherever we go, but that we see as an economic opportunity. It's heartwarming how like-minded we are. Ramesurji's blueprint, as I mentioned, and Mr. Kant's vision of transforming a country of India's size and scale. We don't have matching resources, but if India can pull some of the impressive things that they did over the last 10, 12 years for 1.4 billion people, surely we can do it for 30 million people in Nepal. So I think the recommendations that you had resonate with us. We just need to apply it at a much smaller scale, which is probably good. You know, Alberto Alessina, this famous Harvard economist, had a paper, what is an optimal size of a state? It's a very intriguing academic question. How big a country should be? And I think Nepal, seen from that angle, you know, India and China are big countries, but they are also civilizational states. In modern day sort of Westphalian construct, they may be oversized and very big countries, but they are civilizations. They embody, you know, thousands of years of civilizational values. And it's truly a miracle that, at least in India's case, it's a democracy pulling together, coalescing all the diversity, aggregating all these diverse preferences into a coherent framework and marching ahead. That too is also an inspiration for us as a country with 125 different ethnic groups, languages, the immense diversity that we have in this country, sort of democratic aspirations of this diversity has to be reflected in statecraft. And that's also another goal that we're trying to advance. But a lot of his policy learnings that he thought would be applicable to Nepal do indeed inform our choices. You know, reforms should be bold, government should be predictable. That's what we're trying to do with a stable 5-year roadmap. Execution should be relentless and ruthless, as he said. Just enforce the law, enforcing the law. Don't be distracted by sentimentality when it comes to enforcing the law. You know, the improvement of execution capacities I think that resonates with us. The power of digitalization, and I'd like to echo Michael's suggestions on how Nepal should also be moving ahead. As a landlocked country, I've been talking about how distance and weight are our biggest enemies. You know, the malgovernance that we used to see is just a symptom, because in a country where trading and, you know, and doing business and engaging with the rest of the world is costly. Whatever we do, India can do cheaper, Vietnam can do better, even Bangladesh can outsmart us. What are those areas where, given our structural adversity, can overcome or negate some of those structural handicaps? So Taul Rahit and Duri Rahit has been my favorite phrase for the last 12 years, and a moment has come to really execute that. And our ticket out of that structural adversity is indeed digitalization. And sitting on the mountaintops of Nepal, we can engage with the world. And that's the vision we need to execute, but we need quality infrastructure. So I hope to talk to both Ncell and NTC and our digital team and the Telecom Authority on how we can expedite some of the revolutionary policy steps over the next few months, so that inclusion becomes a reality, connecting Nepal, but connecting Nepal with the rest of the world and marching on economic prosperity. I think that becomes very, very important. Everything that India has done with DPI and the stacked sort of services, starting with Aadhaar and then building on dozens and dozens of digital services to bring people together, but also to make economy much more productive and efficient. I think that's something to learn and emulate from India's experience over the last decade. Deregulation, we're very much on that path, and taking on the advice of Rameshwar Khanalji's report on my very first day in office, in the very first 10 minutes of me sitting in my chair as Minister of Finance, I scrapped 15 antiquated laws and abolished a government entity that had become notorious for extortion of the business community. So that was a signal I was trying to send to the private sector, that we mean business. Honest entrepreneurs need not fear. Now, there was an issue that Mr. Kant also emphasized, that entrepreneurship and private sector expansion has to happen on the bedrock of integrity. But on this, I also have a degree of empathy for our entrepreneurial class, the private sector. A well-known businessman told me about 10 years ago that, Swarnimji, यो नेपालको ऐन कानुन यस्तो छ कि एउटा इमानदार मान्छे छिर्यो भने पनि त्यो ऐन कानुनले यसरी घुमाइदिन्छ कि उ निस्कदाखेरि पनि बेइमान भएर निस्कन्छ. I really empathize with that characterization of our political economy, and we pledge to clean that up. We really pledge to clean that up. And honest men and women entrepreneurs who want to do clean business, pay your taxes, employ people, fill up the public exchequer so that we can reinvest in education, health, rural access, lift our poor people. I think that should be the rule of the game going forward. And this whole culture of elite political institutional capture, policy lobbying, this incestuous relationship between the business community and corrupt politicians has to end. This has to end, and we want to signal that fresh start. So I do sense that some private sector voices are saying, oh, maybe the government is becoming heavy-handed and etc. But we have to clean up this mess. And in doing so, we will do it with wisdom. We'll do it with care. As our party chairman said, "Yo khil nikalne barsa ho." It will be painful to some. But after that, the path we are charting is really different. And again, very much inspired by the vision that Mr. Kant laid out. Private entrepreneurship has to grow, expand, amplify, go global on the bedrock of integrity. And that's the signal that we in government are trying to send. Prime Minister Balendra Shah is absolutely committed to good governance. You've seen him, how he governed Kathmandu over the last 4 years. He probably managed a budget of $1 billion plus, 100 billion, ek kharba bhanda badi ko budget manage garnubo, not a single scandal attributed to him. Right? So that's the high standard that the current cabinet is functioning on. We've been active in Nepali politics personally in public life rather, for the last 12 years. And I've been challenging everyone to show where we have erred. So this is the high benchmark that we want to set. You may have mistakes in the past. Please don't condone those errors. Please don't defend crooks. I sit in the finance minister's chair. I've read reports of the scale of abuse and capture and loot in this country. Sometimes I shudder. And I know many of you. I know many of you by name, by face, we've socialized, but I shudder at the extent of criminality that has been perpetrated against the people of Nepal. This has to stop. So when I speak that it's going to be an era of private sector friendly policies, investment climate that will woo entrepreneurs from Prabhas, from Bidesh, from Swades, I mean it. And hopefully you will see in the forthcoming budget this whole shift towards a liberal economy that will incentivize investment, that will protect private property, that will encourage enforcement of contracts, that will allow you to go global, tax burden that will be less onerous, all that the business community has been asking. But in return, we want you to help us govern this country with the highest standards of integrity. Without that, we will not be able to pull off the high ambitions of economic growth. And in enforcing the law, we will be ruthless. We will be relentless, as Mr. Kant has been saying. But there will be a transition period. There will be breathing space, and the community that was pulled into this morass of filth and corruption by earlier leaders, earlier regimes, we will try and be more understanding and tolerant of circumstances that were not of your design. So I hope I have made this clear, because I keep hearing these mixed signals. Dharpakad bhayo, dukha diyo, lakhetiyo. There's a very fine balance between criminality and integrity, and I hope that will be honored going forward. But people who want to do honest business in this country, invest, grow, create jobs, we will be with you. We will support you in every possible aspect. Industrial policy, design of our fiscal schemes, wise use of subsidies, etc. I think these are all good points, also reflected in Rameswar Kanalji's report that we will adopt. So thank you. I was supposed to comment on the two speakers, so these were my initial remarks. I emphasized perhaps some ideas that resonated with me more profoundly at this stage. As we craft this year's budget, I think we will try to be very faithful to the manifesto that we drafted. You know, in Nepal, we have a political tradition of drafting these magnificent manifestos with lofty aspirations, and the day the election is over, you dump this in a wastebasket. We've done something opposite. We went to the dustbin and pulled it out. We dusted the manifesto and started rereading what we had pledged to the people, because that was, we know practically not every citizen or not every voter read our manifesto and voted for us. But the ideas that were contained in our manifesto is what we believe is what has received this mammoth democratic mandate, and we want to honor that. We really want to honor that. And in it, we had a 5-pillar focus, starting with good governance, both at the macro level and at the micro level. By macro level of good governance, I'm hinting at, again, the absolute end of policy capture, institutional cronyism, all that stuff that I've outlined in some detail, and to ensure that these crooks will not be able to hold the Republic of Nepal to ransom ever again. We will revise laws. We will plug those holes through which they entered and abused the system, and that will be our honest effort going forward. At the micro level, this is digitalization, the power. The faceless, paperless stuff that we read about, talk about, we're already implementing. One of my happiest days after becoming minister has been the day when I read the news that some elderly gentleman received his passport in a ramshackle hut in Magdi district. The passport wahako aanganmai puges. It's a symbol. We may not be able to pull this off with 100% efficiency and accuracy, but that signifies the intent with which this government would like to govern. And this is where the micro delivery and good governance, as felt by an average citizen on a daily basis. This is the direction we're moving in, and I'm happy to note that the Prime Minister is personally invested in this. It's a personal passion of his. And through the Prime Minister's office, we've abolished the Department of IT that sat under the Ministry of Suchana Sansar, and we've moved it to PMO so that we can centralize many of the visionary and ambitious projects related to digitalization. And that will be conducted under the direct watchful eyes of the Prime Minister. So that's a good signal of commitment as well. Second, on economic growth and job creation, I don't want to go into this in greater detail. I've hinted at how we intend to proceed. But public money is precious. 19 kharba or 20 kharba of budget, whatever is the size, we want to crowd in through these scarce public resources, immense private resources, right? So this is where our 1 rupee of investment in the public realm has to attract 5 to 6 rupees of your private money. And this is how we can expand our 70 kharba ko GDP into a much bigger number. I'm glad that Mr. Kant thought that 9 to 10% of sustained GDP growth over the next 30 years is actually conceivable, is possible for Nepal. We had set a more, compared to that benchmark, a more modest goal of 7% growth over the next 7 years in nominal, in real terms, in terms of growth, but the GDP size is measured in nominal terms. And that the benchmark was set based on the experience of the 13 miracle economies that pulled off an impressive growth trajectory over the last 50, 60 years after the Second World War, ignoring Europe and the Western offshoots. So, and this is very much, 9 of the 13 are in East Asia, and story that we can relate to. India was not on the list. India now should be on the list, should that Michael Spence report be revised. Countries like Vietnam are also following closely. Bangladesh was getting close, but they have their Gen Z movement, and also underscoring the point that economic prosperity has to go hand in hand with political good governance, right? The days when African dictators or other autocratic regimes said, you know, you keep quiet, but we'll deliver you the economic goodies, that no longer suffices. And even on this, I think the Indian and the Nepali story align. I'm a big fan of Amartya Sen when he was at the LSE and Harvard. The central point that he made was, you don't need to be rich. You don't need to wait to become a very rich country before starting to invest in poor people. So at very low levels of per capita income, you can have the kind of social welfare regime that you can afford. And I looked at some history, you know, the old age pensions, the so-called Vriddha Bhatta, was executed by Bismarck in 1880 in Germany, when Denmark was at a level poorer than we are at now, like $1,200, $1,500 per capita. Around the turn of the century, they had already implemented accident insurance, maternity care, the Scandinavian welfare. Many of the steps were done at a stage of development comparable to us at this time. So it's the political will and finding resources to govern with humanity. I think that's also very much the direction we want to move in. Big infrastructure projects won't be possible to fund through our regular budget. So we are looking at alternative finance, and here too, we call on the private sector to come in, be very creative, very innovative in funding a lot of the critical infrastructure. You've done a great job in the energy sector. 80% of our energy generation right now is private funded. And thanks to Sailaja Acharya, who introduced boldly a law at a time when, you know, our water resources were sacrosanct. You wouldn't touch it. You couldn't sell it to India. It was deeply politicized for 50 years. These are reform moments when a brave reformer comes and opens the path. And 30 years later, you say how visionary that was. And that's the moment we are in Nepal, in opening up other sectors. Tourism has been amply discussed, the possibilities of digitalization, high value agriculture, even the resurgence of green manufacturing is another area that we would need to look into. So that's going to be hopefully helpful to us as we craft next year's budget. The incredible forex reserves, how do we make a more judicious use of that, is another issue that we'll need to look into. On connectivity, as I said, energy, roads, digital connectivity, and also aviation. You know, one great irony of landlocked countries has been, of course, this adversity, geographical adversity exists, but the precise things that would allow you to negate those weaknesses are exactly the areas where landlocked countries across the world, sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Asia, tend to be the most restrictive. Aviation, telecom, and logistics. Why? Because these are areas that are very amenable to rent extraction. And this is what corrupt politicians need. You look at the last 35 years, the biggest political scandals have always been about the procurement of aeroplanes or leasing of aeroplanes. There's a reason for that. So it's not just that they have some weird fondness for the aviation industry. It's because rent extraction happens in sectors like those, which, as I said, ironically, are the ones we need to reform very seriously to negate our structural weaknesses. So that's the theoretical justification for our looking into many of these issues as well. Middle class, so education, health, social security, financial access. We're looking at it from the security of the middle class. And that was very much the theme that we explained to the Nepali people when we were contesting elections. That's a central theme of our manifesto, and we intend to execute what we have pledged to the Nepali people. Finally, it's the power of the soft power of Nepal. Are all the wonderful things that Mr. Kant was talking about, that Mr. Rameswar Khanal outlined. Despite immense potentials, we've been shackled by malgovernance, and that we need to shed. And here, our location around India, China, Southeast Asia, the immense power of high value tourism that we have, FDI that we can attract from our growing economies, these powerful economies, concessional finance, the traditional sources are dwindling. But as we need to tap into new sources, it's right here in the neighborhood. We need to take advantage of our proximity, exports, and I hope the diaspora is now ready for change and willing to become our ally as we march for the next at least the 5 years, but I hope it will be a decade of rapid transformation of Nepal on the bedrock of good governance, political willpower, and the immense goodwill and solidarity that we've been receiving from our immediate neighbors, multilateral organizations, and the excitement with which the private sector within Nepal, in the diaspora community, and the more mainstream FDI investors across the world are reassessing their priorities and looking to Nepal as a new opportunity. And it is the job of the government to enable it. We will not engineer big changes, we will enable big changes, and that has to happen through the agency of citizens, including our women, as you rightly emphasized, and the private sector collectively. So I hope you will join us in this path of modernization, transformation. 12 years ago, India was at $1,500 per capita. Nepal today is at $1,500 per capita. Over the next 5 to 7 years, we have a goal to augment our GDP per capita to about $3,000, shared evenly among our 30 million people. That's hitting closer to the 100 million economy benchmark that we've set. And listening to Mr. Kant, it's an easy goal to attain, conditional on the bold leadership that we can exhibit and execute. So thank you to Amitabhji, thank you to Rameswarji, thank you all for listening, and thank you Baahrakhari for convening such a wonderful program. I still don't know how golf pairs with a high thing, except the location, the lovely Gokarna location, which by the way has lovely history going back to the Rana days. It's a hunting ground for the Rana aristocrats, but they've, I think, modernized it and all that. I know you invited me to every single year's symposium, but this is the first time I could make it. I'm grateful that I could make it. Thank you so much.